Go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll start off with the roll call. McKee here. Schultz here. Ehrenkamp
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
Alrighty. Topic is the draft 2022 budget and financial management plan. And Brad and team.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council. So I don't have any slides tonight. It's a pretty quick presentation, and we can jump to conversation as soon as possible here. But as you know, we had the first draft of the budget at August 12th work session. Pretty close to meeting council direction, but still had some cuts to go and receive direction from council, ideally to make either cuts or changes to reduce the tax rate. So ultimately, we had to reduce the tax levy by another $47,000 or so. The draft in front of you has a reduced tax levy of $91,000 from that first draft, and the reasons are really here in the first page here. We did actually have a couple extra costs that came in. Fire increased significantly in the Rogers district faster than anticipated. That's of course due to the bellwether pace of growth in that area. I just projected it a little lower, so it's $15,000, pretty significant. In police administration, we have additional wages, and that's actually on the agenda tonight. A position is scored a little higher than where I projected it to score, so that higher grade had to be incorporated in the budget. As far as making cuts, I took one stab at a pretty significant cheat, and that's if you pay off a bond payment early, you don't have to make it next year. So one of the recommendations I have is if we pay off the 2012 B bonds, that $48,000 expenditure just isn't in the budget next year, and that's one way to do some cutting there. We do feel we can incorporate it this year with our 2021 budget. We will have a update on where we're at with the 2021 budget in the October meetings as well. Planner, we did a look at that, and with the additional part-time position of administrative assistant for planning, we feel we could bump up Natalie's billable hours quite a bit. So that's a bump there. And then finally, we took another look at the Public Works billable hours with the addition of the development superintendent, and felt we could bump that quite a bit, and we're very confident we could hit that $46,000 number there. So with that, that's really the changes in the budget from the first draft. It has a projected tax rate of slightly lower. Right now, we're at 43.522. This would bring us to 43.168, so not a gigantic number. So really looking for additional direction from the council at this point. As requested, there's a lot more information here on the positions that are being requested, as well as Councilmember Nichols asked for an updated chart showing some of the population changes that we're projecting too. We do need to adopt the preliminary levy prior to September 30th, so our next meeting on September 23rd, we'll have that in front of you. Ideally, I would get direction tonight, make changes, and we would put the preliminary levy on the consent agenda for the 23rd, just to adopt the preliminary levy.
Recording in progress.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. And then, again, that doesn't mean you can't cut further after that point. We have until the end of the year to adopt the final budget. The preliminary levy is used to draft this property-specific notices that do go to everybody, saying if nothing else changes, this is what your taxes would be for the next year. So it's an important piece of information to get out there, but it doesn't mean you can't keep working on things as well. So with that, happy to answer any questions. Got the full team here tonight, and looking for direction moving forward.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brad. Dean, don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to get us started with it? Do you have any questions or thoughts on where we are or where?
No, I spent time reviewing everything, line by line item. I've got yellow marks everywhere, but everything made sense. The one thing that we talked about, I was a citizen and you guys were talking.
Dust control.
The dust control and such, is that factored into this, or is that another surprise or anything like that? I don't want something like that to just pop up and be, is that something we need to make decision on yet, or?
I believe it's included.
Yes, Mayor and
Budgeted,
Council,
no, okay.
essentially the revenue has been eliminated from the 2022 budget. So the
Okay.
project is still in there from an expenditure side, but the revenue is zero, so which would mean we would not bill people for that project.
I saw that, again, I didn't want that to be a surprise my first trip here, and I thought I read it that way, but I wanted to make sure, so thank you. That was it. I know there's been concern related to, we've got, I don't know how many times I had a neighborhood party at my place, and a number of my neighbors made the comment, we have a planner now, we're gonna hire a part-time planner, why do we continually spend money with landform as far as that? So is there a plan to phase that out over the time, or is that something that's still there? I saw that the costs were still embedded into the budget here, so.
Yeah, another good conversation, and the mayor and I talked about that as well. Really comes down to the level of development that comes in, and then the city-initiated projects. So actually, I would say the council is in 100% control of what that line item is for professional services for landform.
And that was that 50,000? Or am I in the wrong place there?
I think you're about right there.
Yep, that's what was plugged in, yep.
If I remembered right,
50,000.
okay.
So it really comes down to, with one planner and a half-time administrative assistant to support that planner, so that planner can do more of the high-level work.
Yeah, I mean,
If we're taking on projects to update ordinances, like we are right now, we have significant efforts moving forward to update ordinances where we have to add on team members to do that.
Yeah.
If the council said, you know what, actually, we're not gonna do any planning updates next year, and we're done after this year, we could likely lower that number, pretty significantly. So that's actually, I would say that's a policy-driven number. What we're hearing is we've got some more work to do, after this year. So we've got the number
Okay.
plugged in there. But that's a number that, I don't think I'd want to go any lower than 40, like the mayor and I talked earlier this week when he brought it up, just because I'm hearing we have a lot more work to do. But what would happen if that gets lowered, we would monitor it, and I would come back to you and you'd
Well,
say, we need to do this, and I'd say, that's fine, just remember, you only gave us 40 grand, and you're going to go over budget. But that's your fault, and you got to live with it. So,
I trust that, I just,
Yeah.
with the number of people in just the neighborhood out in the middle of the country,
great
they're
question.
wondering about it. So I wanted to get that on record, so thank you. And then the last thing, I think I remember everything that's in the works, but we've got the moratorium as far as any new things coming
In northeast.
on the northeast side. That was just that side. We still have capacity for sewer and water down here yet for new projects and stuff.
Correct.
That's all I got. Thank you for letting me go.
And
Very
just
much.
on that point, Councilman Varenkamp, we will, or are starting the drafting of the water and sewer budgets. They're actually separate. They're not on the same statutory timeline to get approved, and we're pretty deadline-oriented as a team. So we will be
Yeah.
bringing those forward as well in the near future.
I'm excited to hear the presentation tonight about everything that's going on.
Yeah.
So it's cool step in this little country town.
Good deal. Did you have anything? I saw you
Yeah.
writing some notes.
Couple questions. So I see we have code enforcement budget cut by a third. What does that look like? And
What line item is that from?
it's actually line one's basically
180?
Thank you.
180, yeah, sorry.
No worries.
Page 3.
Yeah, and I think the reason we were looking at doing somewhat of a cut to that was just based on feedback on how proactive to be. So it was just a reaction to kind of the discussion with, that we've had at council.
Yeah, and additionally, if you're removing potential violations from the code, like we're on track to do so, that's, less work to be done as well, because those were a lot of the violations, were those nuisances.
So is that eliminating any proactive then? Still canvassing of the community or?
No, no, we're just envisioning, we would have, the intensity is the follow-up with taking the photos, mailing out the violations, following up, and if you're taking away those opportunities but we're still anticipating the same, one full sweep a year plus complaints.
Okay, so we'll still actively investigate complaint-based.
Yes.
Okay. And then, the last time we talked in our last work session, we talked about deferring staff additions to later on in the year for budget impact. Is that, any of that included in this?
We went and looked back, the HR communications type position that was already a July 1st start. The sergeant has already been authorized this year. So I think we went back and we stated the ones that could be deferred would really be, that we would like pick to be deferred, would be the development superintendent type position, which is relatively not as much as a budget impact. Let's see here. So I guess the short answer is they're not deferred any further in this budget yet.
But there was some more information on kind of what the breakdown of costs was.
Correct. So from the public works side, we're pretty adamant we need help as soon as possible. So we have them still starting January 1st for most of the positions.
I didn't understand the one thing in the staff report where it talks about public safety, the administrative assistant increase going from 3/4 of an FTE to 1 full FTE would have a budget impact of 43,000. So are we saying that?
It's benefits.
Yeah, but that's still,
Yeah.
that's still a huge number for 1/4 of an FTE.
Yeah, so let me pull it up here.
Does that include the other reclassification expenses as well, for the other position?
Let's see, oops, I pulled the wrong one up. All right, so,
Well, that's different than the one we're talking about tonight, the regular meeting, right, with the administrative manager.
Yes.
yeah. So we have, well, those would be pretty similar. So for example, assuming family health insurance, that's $19,000.
Okay. Oh, because now they're full-time, they're entitled to benefits?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yep.
So there's some incremental in para, Medicare, Social Security, but call that 1,000 or 2,000.
Okay.
So then it's, the wages and insurance is a significant deal. Now, that's where we have open enrollment actually coming up, and we'll be able to
Yes.
tighten these up. And if these individuals don't choose family insurance, we can tighten the numbers up before we have to finalize the budget.
We just have to, with health insurance, we aren't able to get our health insurance numbers until the small market opens up for renewal starting October 1st. So we'll have our rates by the 14th and then be able to bring our benefit proposal to council to look at. But ideally, we'll be under that. We just have seen some fluctuation in the insurance market. So we put in I can't remember exactly what our increase was, but we did
10%, I think.
a 10% assumption just in case, not knowing how COVID and other things that are happening out there would affect things for us.
Okay. Do you have any idea what the rate change going from 43.5 to 43.16, what the impact on that of the typical home in Corcoran is?
I could do some work if you give me a few minutes and try to figure that out.
That's fine. I mean, I don't need an answer right now, even if you can get an answer before we have to approve the budget.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
No, those are the biggest things, the deferment and the
Sounds
current
good.
one.
Counselor Nichols?
The same things kind of jumped out at me, so I won't recover the same topics. I think staff did a good job being creative and trying to find additional revenue sources and ways to add to the revenue side without increasing the levy. So thank you for being good about sharpening your pencils on that side of it. And I'll reiterate my support and understanding that the workload for staff has continued to escalate year over year, and we have to accommodate that to ensure that we can continue to provide adequate levels of service. I would like to spend a little time on the operations superintendent. So the number that I'm seeing in the packet at 98K, is that full year or is that part of the year? This is on page 3.
Full year.
Okay, I thought that was a bigger number before. Did that come down?
That's a good question. It may have, yes. I think what we did is we discussed the likely percentage allocation towards water and sewer and adjusted that number up.
Okay.
So a portion of that is paid, that's the general fund impact. I think the overall costs are closer to 130 with benefits and everything.
That's the number that's stuck in my head.
With,
Okay.
yeah, so with the water and sewer helping to pay for that position.
Okay. So I wanted to propose another way of thinking about it. So we talked about this before, and I kind of pushed staff a little bit on this one. And I think what I had suggested before was adding like a project manager role or a subordinate position instead as a way to allow the workload to be split between multiple folks. And I'm thinking something like that, or maybe even the creation of sort of a peer role to the existing superintendent, and maybe you divide the responsibilities a little bit differently to give people more time to do the strategic planning and systems creation and procedure manuals and so on. I feel like an investment in creating a peer to split the responsibilities might be easier to implement, easier to find someone to fill, and create a better promotion path when you get a big enough increase in need where you need a superintendent level, like a higher level superintendent. I also was concerned about our ability to train somebody to take over the tactical day-to-day responsibilities across the whole function, and how that would impact this new role's ability to focus on developing those higher level strategies.
And Kevin, maybe you can be helpful on kind of coloring in the details here. We did take a peek at that. We felt that we didn't know how to implement that. And Kevin, you were more involved than I. Do you recall the gist of our conversation on that?
Yeah, I think it's quite complex, and I hear what Councilmember Nichols is saying, and I think that's the long-term vision. I think the struggle is, how do we go from essentially over the last 5 years a crew that just continues to absorb responsibilities? How do we transition that, to your point? How do we have someone focusing on planning out what we're doing weeks 2 and 3 from now instead of what we're doing today and tomorrow? And it's an easier transition if we also line shifted and brought in another 5-person crew and just hired somebody, where we're kind of organically dividing and lifting and whatnot. It's a little more complicated process, if that makes sense, because we're incrementally growing, at 1 person a year, or, 1 person a large development, however you want to characterize it. So it really, I think, came down to, in my mind, immediate need of, I need to pull and focus, basically my top supervisor up to really focus on the planning, training, and being less of a doer. I need them spreading out, coordinating with other departments. I mean, just the level of coordination amongst the city internally, not let alone externally, is significantly changed. And then I need that training. I need that person bouncing around training. And so that split that I see is the engineering component of the public works world, right? That's the development superintendent, for lack of a better term. And that person's really going to help connect all the pieces, because right now we don't have enough bodies to even attend all the meetings to really do a good job. To be quite frank, we're just really struggling with the coverage component. We're training very well, but as we keep onboarding people, and eventually we're going to split to smaller crews, we can't do a lot of things individually in the public works world, so that's a challenge. So it's really just our ability of growing 1 person at a time, I think, led us to believe that this uplift approach was more important than a sideways. I mean, we need both. We need uplift, which is the operational, and then we need the sideways lateral, which would be the engineering development. And then if utilities go, we need another one, because that's a whole nother world. So we kind of are doing both the uplift and the expansion laterally. It just, we're positioning ourselves to do that when it's appropriate, I guess, so we don't overextend ourselves. Does that answer your question, or I can stop and let you continue asking more details?
That's helpful. Brad, is it possible to bring up the future org chart? Do you have that handy?
Yes. I'm second.
That'll help me visualize it.
Councilmember Schultz's question.
Give him a minute.
Gotta get him 2 more hands.
All right, now I can pull up the sheet.
While he's doing that, I certainly understand where you're coming from, Kevin, with the breadth of responsibilities and the amount of things that folks need to cover continuing to increase. You're right, I agree, you can't continue to have everybody responsible for every area. You're going to have to divide it at some point. And it sounds like I heard you say the development superintendent role is kind of the beginning of that, to pair off some of the responsibilities for new construction projects and things that are happening in the city. So I endorse that approach for sure.
Yeah, I do see that branching off, and then I do see as we continue to develop and add more parks and more rec programming and more citizens' requests to meet independently and more small projects that we're able to take on should whatever direction or policies you guys set, like we continue to need just bodies to meet with people, to guide them, to encourage them. I mean, that if we get 3 calls a day and schedule resident meetings, just let alone above and beyond the baseline, you know, we could be a lot more responsive to those, quite frankly, to keep the team going and respond to all the requests we have and the engagement that we have. We probably could improve in that area. We just don't have a body to send to them in a meaningful way, in a timely way. And so sometimes you might hear concerns about that, and it's really just due to we don't, you know, we kind of treat them first come, first serve, or based on the need or urgency. And, you know, we just, I mean, that's a body that can go and evaluate a project or give guidance to a resident. I mean, we really don't have that capacity right now, and it's something I think we can improve upon when we, you know, provide services to our residents.
Okay, so help me understand. I kind of get the idea you need somebody to think farther ahead and start to develop long-term practices. Walk me through the idea behind this being a vertical elevation versus trying to split responsibilities between 2 people and keep them at the same sort of manager level. What do you get from this approach that you like?
So you're just looking at the structure there of operations superintendent, operations manager,
Yeah.
Kind of the traditional quote unquote public works world. I think the difference there is, I think the split that you're referring to, where the lateral split of, you know, calling it operations manager, or, you know, immediately splitting into streets and parks or something, is that to really do that more efficiently, we would need a larger crew underneath that position. So if we had, say, double the amount of maintenance workers, I think that's when that's warranted to split out, you know, the operations manager into a parks manager, streets manager, what, you know, record, you know, whatever you want to call it as it absorbs and moves around. But I don't know if calling the operations, if we moved operations superintendent down laterally in that linear latitudinal characterization, and is even divvied up the maintenance workers between the 2, I don't think we go forward. I think we probably stay the same and maybe go backwards, because I just think we need like a whole nother kind of unit to really go laterally, if that makes sense. And I do think we are missing that, you know, planning. You know, I envision the operations superintendent thinking about parks every day, right? 2 hours, what's my park project? What's my park concerns? What's my park equipment? What problems are at the park? You know, whatever impacts the park. I expect them thinking about streets. What do we need for streets? What are material issues? What are supply chain issues? You know, what do we need for staffing, HR issues internally, mentoring internally. I need that operations superintendent to be thinking about all the aspects daily, and right now they're not. You know, they're thinking about parks these 3 days. They're thinking about streets these 3 days, and I'm being really generic when I say that, because I'm not discounting what they're doing, but they're just so focused on that specific task, they kind of got to turn their brain off and make sure they're doing things safely, right? So I just really need more planning, and that takes that body up out of that position. So that's why I think the lift, for lack of a better word, is more of appropriate today move. We're going to get a lot more value than we are kind of splitting up into smaller lateral groups. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Any of these positions in that column, are you thinking they're new people to the organization, or are they potential people in the organization and then we hire up from the bottom?
I think the development superintendent position is likely outside of the organization. I don't think we have anyone in the organization that would probably qualify or want it, to be quite frank. So I think that's an external. And I think the traditional public works operations one, I think we have a really strong team. So I think that that would likely be in-house with backfilling at some level underneath, wherever we feel like if we feel like they can do the job, then we would, consider them strongly. If we feel like they're waiting on experience or something, then we would open it up to the best available candidate.
Okay.
Did you have anything further on that, Jeremy?
I'm just thinking this through. So one of the reservations that I heard was if you try to split the tactical level folks, like the maintenance workers, the crew leader, between two managers, there's not enough people to make enough horsepower to get projects done. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think you make a significant difference in how we operate today. I mean, they fall under different titles, but we still need 5 or 6 people to accomplish a lot of our projects, right? So if you split those down to 3 or 4, you're still borrowing from another department, and you're really not gaining a whole lot. It's kind of how we function today. We're all under one silo, but we're all kind of commingling the department. So I think we get more value focusing on the planning, coordination, really training, whatnot, the soft stuff, the important stuff that doesn't show up, that really makes a difference over the long run. I feel like there's more value today in that move. And then as we continue to hopefully grow, if it warrants it, and we get more workers or different lead crew positions, then I think it's a lot more efficient to then spread out more laterally.
Okay.
And I think there's a bigger value difference there, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize, it's kind of hard to read on the screen. It's clear on my computer here, so. This is the operations manager here, operations superintendent, development superintendent. What Kevin's talking about is the next steps would then be putting more managers here. So essentially we have a streets manager, a parks manager with more crews underneath them. And then the only other branch would then be potentially a utility superintendent, and then their water plant manager or something like this under this, another new branch at that point.
So is effectively Kevin doing the positions of the superintendents now?
I'd say yes, between him and Pat, yes. And this is why, Kevin's, well, they're all putting in extra hours. I don't know how many days a week Pat's at work well after 3 p.m. I don't know how many days a week I get emails from Kevin after midnight. And that's not, and same with this team down the line here.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin.
No problem.
So, does that, okay. And in terms of my kind of thoughts, I think I don't have too much to add besides what I said at the previous meeting and what was kind of said here. I think the big thing was getting a little bit better understanding of some of the new hires and the exact costs and timing, which staff did in this. I guess one that I maybe wanted to mention, and I know Brad, you and I talked about it, but talked about this a bit the other day, the HR/communications role and the budget impact on that. That, for this budget, was a July start date, right?
July.
Correct.
And that was a 45-ish $1,000 impact?
Correct.
Okay. I guess I'd like to see where the council is on that one specifically. It sounds like the communication side and, no, the HR, well, both.
Yeah, and so just to
needed.
fill the rest of the council in our conversation, really, as it kind of mentions in the packet there, it's a recognition of areas of needed improvement. Jessica does an amazing job at HR, but she's managing a whole department and has far too much to do to be strapped down with HR all the time. And just, we're also not doing enough for communications. We've heard that thing from the council loud and clear. We need to be more communicative. We need to create more content and be out there more with the community. So really, it's a recognition of two gaps. Now, in talking with the mayor, you know, one thing we've done in the past when we have a shakeup or added duties come in, we've actually taken the entire department, take items from everyone's job description on a whiteboard and kind of re-put them where they might be. So is it a HR communications position? I'm not sure if it's entirely yet. Is it a shakeup of some of Michelle's duties, some of Shauna's duties, some of Jessica's duties that come in and where HR falls somewhere else? It's really a recognition of we're at least a person short to fill the gap in these areas. So it would need some significant fleshing out. I guess what the ask is a placeholder for one additional FTE to start next year, that over the next couple of months, we could flesh out. And talking to the mayor, I even mentioned if the expectation was do that now before we approve the budget, that's what we would try to do for you.
Is everyone on that? Make sense?
I think the communication need is significant. I actually wanted to follow up on that a little bit too, because we talked last time about all the time that gets invested in writing up minutes and preparing packets and all of that necessary but tedious activity. And I suggested that staff look into what can we do to automate some of that or try to make it more efficient through software tools or something like that. Have you had a chance yet to investigate that?
Yeah, Michelle has been working on, she's tested out the work sessions from August 12th and the meeting itself, and is working through to see which method, listening to the meeting all the way through, or automating it by having it translate it, what would be more efficient. She's trying to do that in between, but she is in the process of it, and was excited to at least give it a good shot. And see
I
if that's
applaud the
something we
experiment.
do.
I used to do the minutes twice.
So an automated minutes, is that looking at word for word verbatim?
That's how it currently comes out, but it would likely be just spending some time going through it. So so you'd be reading rather than listening to,
Okay.
the video for.
Converting it
several
into a
hours.
more of a summary.
Yeah.
Maybe
Style
eliminating words versus
Yeah.
writing.
Creating.
Building it up.
Otherwise, that would be a discussion of the council. If the council wanted to go to verbatim, then it would be, there's the minutes, here's your 18 pages of minutes.
Right.
And
I feel like with everything being on YouTube and all that now, verbatim minutes are not all that needed.
Well, it's also
Better
not
to have the summary.
it's not a big risk either. I mean, if it saves somebody 4 hours of work, I would be all for it.
For verbatim?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to be held accountable regardless. There's no reason not to have verbatim minutes.
Right.
So I'm not opposed to it. If it saves time at a reasonable cost. It's a quality of life issue.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Why do we need to document the minutes when we have video, audio, all that stuff? Is that just one of those things we're holding on to?
Requirement of the state of Minnesota that we record our minutes, if you would like, I could show you Falcon Heights. All they do is record motions and seconds. There's nothing besides the
Wow.
agenda and motions and seconds on that. So it's kind of up to you on what you want your record to look like. So we've kind of taken the approach since I got here. When I first got here, minutes were very minimal with just about the motion, and staff presented the report. So they were a little bit shorter, and then we did kind of, through some trial and error, try to find a middle ground to talk. In the minute style that I have Michelle work with, it's generally trying to make sure that things that aren't in the packet that you guys discussed that seem to be something that people might really be interested in, that's kind of pulling that additional information so you have all of the kind of pertinent information, because agenda packets are always permanent, but then just trying to pull out kind of those big important things that we think people should know about when they're trying to listen to the meeting.
I'll ask it a different way. What is there about audio and video that doesn't fulfill the Minnesota requirements on open laws and all that stuff? What,
Those are not required. We are not required to keep them more than 90 days.
The
We
minutes
do
are the-
choose.
The minutes
We're
are the
required, it's our
official
official record, and that's the requirement of.
written record,
A written-
documented, hard copy, can't be on computer?
We can have it electronically, and we do, so we save
So
all of
again,
our.
I'll stop beating a dead horse. The video and audio are electronic copies of everything. There's no way around that.
Not
Wow.
currently.
I'll be
I'd
quiet about it.
say call the legislator, and
Or there'll be calls.
Yeah,
deal.
the other, I think,
I'll join you.
to me, the importance of minutes on top of meeting this statute and requiring a permanent record is they come back to you and you then approve what the permanent record is. And so we have at times had wrong minutes, or a few things that the council has caught.
Right.
And
I
it comes back
understand
to
that.
you with, yes, this is what we did correct. This is the correct record. And I think that's important.
And I think the reason I like the minutes, the style we do now, not verbatim, is someone's looking back for something, they can get that and see more of a summary and overview of it, and then they can find, okay, this is generally where they talked about it, and go find the video, and they kind of work off each other, as opposed to if you had a 15-page document for every, meeting for minutes, and then people are trying, it'd be the same thing as scrubbing through the video, trying to find the right spot. So I think it works a little better in conjunction, like together like that, but that's just my preference.
Didn't Brad say there was a way to link the text to the video?
I
There
didn't
is,
say anything
there
yesterday.
there is a way to do some agenda parsing that we could certainly look into, potentially with our capital improvement plan coming up, or
Cool.
some of our ARPA funds.
How much do you think you'd save if you went away from the minutes that we have now and just put in motions?
A lot of time. It-
Hours.
Yes,
So,
a lot of time.
well, I guess what I'm wondering is, so there's people in the community that don't have access to computers, right? But what if we had a terminal out in the public space that you only had the ability to look up actual video from city council meetings? That could get uploaded automatically, so the general public could come in during business hours and watch the content if they wanted there, and then we just have motions in there. Would we come out ahead?
Probably. It really comes down to, this is the record of your meetings and how you want future residents to understand the record that happened. So this is 100% at the discretion of the governing body. So we can do whatever we want. I would say, does anyone ever ask for the minutes?
Not generally. I would say when it's really important is when we're looking at minutes from 1989,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to figure out whether or not we actually held an assessment hearing for a property that I need to assess 30 years later.
Yeah,
So I
that's
would
all
say
old. Right.
those are the kind of things that often people look back at. Otherwise, they're just really interesting to see the handwritten minutes that we have.
Yeah, but even minutes, even with staff writing out minutes, what they think is the most impertinent leaves it down to subject, right?
Yes.
Correct.
So that's why I was thinking, the video is out there for anyone that has internet access. They can view it wherever, but if we had a terminal where somebody could just see it, if they didn't have that ability, just lock that terminal so all they can view is minutes of meetings for city meetings.
Well, libraries could do that too. I mean, we wouldn't necessarily have to have a
Libraries do
terminal
that
here.
too, yeah, I mean,
It's true.
yeah, I guess we could get away with that too. But,
Yeah, I regret any time somebody has to spend a lot of time typing out what I say. And I feel like the video is sufficient. I like the idea of verbatim minutes because it's more searchable and it's more convenient. But if there's a compromise that allows us to save somebody 20 hours a month, let's talk about that. I think that's worth considering.
Yeah.
And that frees up bandwidth for other things.
And I'd say your 20 hours a month is not off.
I didn't think it would be, yeah.
what other communications are we talking about in this roles?
So I think for the communication piece, we'd be looking at them completely taking over social media. Right now, Jessica Christensen-Beck does the social media in addition to the recreation programming. So it'd be focusing on doing some more content and having time to work on content. But with our new software that we're implementing, we have the ability to do some information on full page utility bills that will be coming out. So there's a potential to do some, information to our residents in that format, as well as making sure that the websites Michelle works on the website as well, but potentially having someone who has a bit more ability to focus on
And
that.
the newsletter could be taken off of Shauna, who's our administrative assistant, but doing all sorts of extra projects that are spreading her apart. We have a hodgepodge of people doing communication. Really would take a lot off of different people's plates. And then as far as enhancement, yeah, I think an enhanced social media presence is certainly good. We've not done Instagram, and that's where everyone is these days on Instagram. That would be a whole nother thing. We haven't really been engaging. I'm not on Instagram. Haven't really been engaging, back and forth. Somebody posts something on there, it could be more proactive, follow up with this person. I mean,
Yeah.
it's taking it wherever you want it to be. I'm sure you all have had ideas where enhanced communication would help too. Street projects are coming up. Well, we don't have a who right now to really, add extra communications for the neighborhoods and those types of things. Steel coating's taking place,
Yeah, we
dust
can
control.
can look at enhancing our flyer, just doing some more even marketing
Yeah.
and things like that for us.
And highlighting, for example, what our fire department and police department are doing. And Paula does all the social media. Well, Paula and Pete do social media for the police departments. We have a sergeant and hopefully an office, administrator doing the social media there. They do a great job.
So if we got rid of minutes, could the rest of the communications be absorbed by whoever was doing minutes? Assuming they were doing minutes on Parks and Trails, Planning Commission, City Council.
No, Natalie does planning and Jessica does,
Oh.
Christensen Buck does Parks and Trails, so. So if you call it 20 hours a month, that'd be kind of your extra time to do something different. But right now, Michelle's deputy clerk, and elections are getting busier and busier. The data practices side of things are getting busier and busier, so that's the important side of her job too.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's more important that we have an HR than a communication side of it.
And I think it would allow us, when HR isn't taking precedence, to focus on and come back into the communications, because as human resources is really important to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's, because we've had lots of folks out on different types of leaves over the last year and a half, and lots of making sure that we're checking all the boxes with different types of leaves
And we've had, basically always are in a hiring process, which takes a significant amount of time and effort. So communications also could be, job could also be maybe better in helping in recruitment. We're having a terrible time attracting employees, but we're doing traditional marketing. Could a communications person be more working with the schools, getting information out, for positions available. There's lots of legs you can use for it.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I kind of like the potential combo role of that, as opposed to two separate full roles? I know you're maybe not as sold on that.
Well, we'd have to do
Flesh
the
it
work
out a bit.
and see if that's a
Gotcha.
job somebody would want.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
you gotta find a candidate to want to do those types of things, and I don't know if people come through, I really like HR, I really like communication. If I want to do both, I don't know.
Right.
Most people probably specialize in HR, especially coming out of the private sector.
You're probably looking for somebody newish, or.
But you're gonna have to get somebody newish to figure out Instagram and all these other things.
Yeah.
So
Got a
is,
couple of grade school kids that are around here that probably figure out a lot faster now.
intern could probably help with some of it. So the 45,000-ish that's budgeted in there currently for the half year, would that be either if it's a combo roll or ballpark if it was two rolls or?
It's really just I think I put a grade 8 in there, which is similar to our accountant position as far as, and our deputy clerk for compensation level. So it's really an assumption of a position at that kind of skill level.
Gotcha.
And if needed, we could always adjust higher date based on what the job description looks like. And so we'd be bringing, that's really our, like Brad said, what we'll be focusing on is trying to get you guys a job description, because you'd approve the hiring. Making sure that looks okay.
Makes sense. Is there anything else you want to go over?
Yeah, I got just a question.
Go over for it.
Retention, do we have turnover right now? I'm sitting here and I've always worried about, we've got really good people here. Are we doing everything we can to keep them, other than just making them work harder, longer, all of that stuff for no money? That's always been a concern of mine wherever I've been. And is everybody happy that we know? Are we losing people? With a lot of frustration, are we handling it all well? Do we need a counselor? I mean,
Yes.
it just,
Got four right
am I hitting all of them right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a.
I want this to be a
deep
great place to
question.
live, and I want it to be a great place to work for the people
Yeah.
that do everything for us.
Yeah, I think, fortunately, due to the leadership of Jessica, Matt, and Kevin, they've done a really good job of
Yeah.
managing the soft side of why people stay. Compensation's always a thing. We were talking about this, kind of thinking back through the pandemic, and other than really medical related, knock on every piece of wood you can find, we kept everybody during a pandemic, when everyone's lives really changed. Our biggest challenge, well, that's a big challenge that we focus on a lot, but with a growing city, adding positions and attracting more people has really been challenging. Significantly so. For Maggie's position, fortunately, we had Maggie apply. Got him back to the drawing board. Same thing for Jody, actually. Same thing for the last couple police officer positions. We've been getting the one person who'd be good at doing the job, and
Wonderful.
lucky at that way. But that's been a really significant challenge.
And I know it's been a challenge for a lot of cities. It's not
Every
that
city.
unique.
Every
It's,
city.
In the private sector, it's a major challenge right now, too.
Absolutely.
So we're not
Absolutely.
the only ones affected by it, but
For sure.
Yep.
most of the studies I've seen too is that salaries don't retain people. It's the work environment retains people. Salaries attract people,
Makes sense.
but it doesn't retain people long-term. So,
As a follow-up to earlier this year, when you were embarking on the compensation study, is the outcome of that baked into this proposal, or is that still in process and it wasn't done in time? Where does that sit?
Correct, the latter. Actually, timing is right. We've been working on this for the last month or two with our spare time or nights and weekends with a beverage in our hands. And so we did get data back from everybody. We crunched the numbers. And actually yesterday I met with George Gamak, who actually helped design our system when we first put it in. And he does this work professionally for his entire career. He's retired now-ish, but he still helps a couple select cities, and helps Corcoran for free. He's probably saved us tens of thousands of dollars in my 8 years here with job descriptions. Yeah, probably $100,000 if we really wanted to itemize it out. So what we found is with our wages, I did a spreadsheet, And kind of where cities had lower wages than us, it was kind of reddish pinkish, and higher wages than us, greenish. So kind of give a scattering chart of visualization. And it looked, once you look at a big picture, it seems kind of 50-50. So then I just said, let's look at minimums only. Take away the maximums. When we look at minimums, where are we at? It was very similar, where it was kind of 50-50 in the grouping. Then I isolated the maximums. There was more green in the maximums, so we were behind, more so in the max than the minimums. But then what I did is I looked at which positions have more greens than pinks, reds in their positions. And it really comes down to the higher level positions within the organization. So I met with George and I presented that. This is what I'm seeing. What's going on here? What ideas do you have? And this is actually where he described to me the creation of the plan. So with pay equity, you're forced to do pay and the challenge of the job. And then there's a point system. So 100 points, 200 points. I think Jessica's 433. I'm 505 or something. And that's supposed to line up with your pay. And it's within a range there. However, when the system was set up, it was set up to follow that arc. And then just due to the size of the city, the tax capacity, the willingness to pay, they shaved the head, the top of the pay, and arced it this way. So rather than continuing up, they arced it. And again, a city of this size can only pay so much at certain times.
Mhm.
So what I have asked George to do is look at what he offered to do, which I accepted, is look at what it would take kind of to tweak that arch more vertical and then attach a cost to it. And I'm not far enough to get that back. So it's not in there, but actually we're at a really good spot as far as understanding what the problem is, why it exists, and what the council can choose to do. But it really comes down to, actually, all the three people at this table, virtual Kevin.
Virtual Kevin.
Not real Kevin.
We haven't seen him much.
Real Kevin's fine.
Lieutenant Burns. And then, then there's a whole nother thing within policing, which is another whole conversation on, other departments have extra longevity pays and different things that we don't offer here in Corcoran. So I think we've actually done a really good job of isolating what the problem is, and we know what some solutions could be.
So circling back to the first part of our conversation where you hadn't baked in delays in positions yet. So I don't think, from what I remember, nobody on council was opposed to trying to get us to a point where we're competitive across the board. Is there enough slack by delaying positions to enable you to do that within this levy?
I think so. I mean, a month or two at a pretty high wage position is pretty significant. Ideally, insurance comes in lower. And really, I think it's a handful of positions that really have the issues. I don't think it's an organization-wide problem, which is a good thing.
Mhm.
It's not maybe as poor as, I know anecdotally from our level, we see it with, the positions coming across that are quite a bit higher at the leadership level. But we didn't have a good way of really show why that was taking place. I don't think it's a rampant organizational problem. I also think it's, there's a couple ways you could approach it. You could approach it incrementally, or you could approach it all at once. I can tell you the leadership team and talent in Corcoran is exceptionally high, and I'd love to keep them all.
Nothing sows chaos like the loss of good leaders. So,
Is waiting until July a good time for that HR person? Or sooner would be better?
I think we'd wanna. That's a great question. I think from a resources standpoint, I think we can, with having Maggie and Jody, or Maggie on board particularly, has been really helpful. I can pass several things off on to Maggie, but there's a lot that we'd like to continue to do. So I think July we can certainly make it work. It just is time, resources, getting the hiring. We'll have several things to,
It'll take time to figure out
It'll take
exactly
time.
what the
It'll take a little
position
bit
is.
of
Well,
time.
and
applicants.
if we're hiring, potentially, good luck getting even all those 3 positions hired by January 1st, even if we start moving forward this year.
Okay.
We haven't even brought the job descriptions to you yet, because we're still starting to work on those. So we might find, as we get to November, if we've not started the searching process, well, let's at least back those off to March at that point,
Okay.
because we're not gonna get anybody on board until then.
Makes sense.
If we don't have searches for some of these nearly completed before the holidays, you might as well just wait until after the holidays to start. So we could back some of those off.
And I think those are all things that we can, with the final levy that we'd be adopting in early December, we'll have a much better idea of where we're at with those things.
Very good.
The only other last thing I wanted to bring up was kind of related to being able to attract new people, and it's specifically regarding part-time police officers. And there's pretty significant increase in the hourly wage. And Matt, maybe if you could give us a little insight on why that is and how you came to that number.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, as you can imagine, there's not a lot of people sticking around in law enforcement once they reach their retirement. For a long time, our community was able to maybe get people who were kind of in the sunset of their career, that were experienced officers with larger communities, that decided it was time to depart their career, but they wanted to continue with the profession for a couple more years. And those were usually that's the type of candidate we attracted, and we've had great success with them. We have a couple of them still. The number of people kind of sticking around in the profession beyond when they need to has dwindled significantly in the last 5 years. So the volume of candidates is there, but then also a couple of them that we have had, we've lost. And we started looking at, well, who are we losing them to? We've been losing them to the airport. We've lost other local candidates that said they'd love to consider working for us. However, they said they end up going to Three Rivers Parks. And the two that we were really losing in competing with part-time candidates was Three Rivers and the airport. And kind of sat down, after the first one or two, we said, well, we're not going to get them all. We can't always, we can't always compete with everybody. But as we, the applications dropped off significantly, started talking to some of the people that went to work for them that, either lived in our community or neighboring communities, and said, what would have made you choose Corcoran versus airport or Three Rivers? And they said, this is a part-time job. The reason we pick up the part-time job in addition to full-time employment or after employment is really for the income. And when those are paying, $10 an hour more, it's a no-brainer for me to go work for those organizations. So we looked at, well, how does that align with what are we compensating our full-time officers at, and what's the philosophy? And how does it align with those agencies' philosophies? Three Rivers Parks, for instance, will bring in part-time officers. They will lateral them in anywhere on their pay scale based on their full-time experience. So if they brought in somebody that had been a police officer for 10 years, they'd pay them what a 10-year parks officer was making.
Wow.
And, obviously we're not going to compete with everybody's philosophy, but when we looked at how do we index, what our part-time officers are doing versus what our full-timers are doing? And what we looked at doing is this wage adjustment essentially pays them what I think it's a year one police officer in Corcoran would be making.
Yep.
So what a starting out officer would be making. So it really is kind of comparable. The expectations are the same and the job is the same. I think that's a pretty defendable logic for why we would pay them at that amount, along with the old amount. It wasn't getting the job done for us anymore, and that was based on direct reports from everybody. We could interview the people that left and the people that were selecting those other agencies.
Oh,
Gotcha. Thank you. Makes sense so far? Yeah. Anything else on this version of the budget?
If I can, I
Yes,
have
go right
answered
ahead.
Councilmember Schultz's question.
Yeah.
Asked about the change in tax rate and what would that do. So on a $500,000 home, the slight reduction in tax rate would really knock off, $33 a year. Now, that home value increased, however, right? So assuming a 3% increase, that home is now worth $515,000. And that would actually result in about a $96 tax increase, or $8 a month. So with essentially, which is a 2% increase. So essentially by a 3% increase in housing value, it'd be a 2% increase in taxes, so you're kind of knocking off a little bit of that impact of valuation.
Yeah, we're not gonna be able to help people with valuations.
Right.
And I don't think we're gonna have a big enough impact to get over that valuation hurdle.
Yeah, so for me, I look at, okay, and now next year I'm being asked to pay $8 a month more. What's my value for it? And ideally, we have better communication, better response times in public works, more park programming with time, better planning help because administrative assistant. So it comes down to, does this budget reflect, is it worth $8 a month more? That's the way I would look at it. Is it worth $8 a month more than what we have right now?
I think inflation alone is going to account for an $8 increase just for the same value, fortunately.
But I also think 3% increases might be low for some of the
Yeah,
properties.
I'm sure it is. Well,
Yeah.
in reality, I think I read values have gone up by 18 to 19% depending on the area. So valuations that we're seeing now don't reflect that. We don't control the valuation increases, all right? Does that come from the assessor's office directly?
Yep.
Do we have a read on what they're going to be doing next year for valuations?
We just gotta get
No.
through this year.
That would,
No,
so
it's a 200-year project.
It's just crazy.
so what we use for, so January 2nd of this year was the valuation date used to then build our tax capacity for this next year's budget.
Mhm.
So January of next year will be the next update.
Okay.
So everything's set at this point. And if everyone's gone up by 18%, then it really kind of floats everyone evenly anyway. It's not like you're getting 18% more taxes because everyone else is increasing as well.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens since we're part of a large urban county, as those commercial properties change in value, what that will do to us. But that's out of our hands, really.
Doesn't the increase in valuation have an inverse effect on our tax rate, though?
Correct.
So we could see a further drop in the rate.
For the following year. This has been baked in already. The valuations are all set for this
Okay.
budgeting process. Our tax capacity, it might fluctuate a little bit, it always does towards the end of the year, but it's minimal,
Okay.
so.
Good. Okay.
So what I'm hearing is bring roughly the same budget back on the consent agenda for preliminary levy adoption and then go from there. Is that fair?
See a couple head nods.
And look at the position delays to fund whatever adjustments are necessary.
And then with it being on the consent agenda, we'll be putting together the tax insert with the numbers that we put together in this budget. So just so you know that will all be reflected in there as well. And likely we'll be doing all of that on the consent agenda. So if you have comments, please feel free to get those to me beforehand and we can always make adjustments.
And I'm glad you brought that up. So this is, for example, the insert that we put in there that helps to describe, what's taking place with the budget. So we'd update these numbers essentially. We would do the tax effects, what a home would see for changes, the budget process. We kind of have allocation of tax dollars. Here's where your money goes. And then this gets mailed with those notices from Hennepin County. So we pay like $1,000 to Hennepin County to print and send these out with their other notices. So it's Corcoran specific information.
We talked in the past about having a chart that showed the breakout between commercial and non-commercial.
I feel like Alan's asked that for several years.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to double check if there was other things you'd want in there.
I think that
So,
one.
Talking about-
commercial and non-commercial, I know we've had this conversation before again, but explain that one more time.
Well, we're heavily dependent on residential.
Oh, where does the taxes come from?
Right.
Thank you.
So when people complain that they're gonna put a commercial thing in there, they can see how residents are basically funding this community with, there's support from commercial, but it's heavily
So kind of like a
residential
pie
dependent.
chart that
Yeah.
shows residential versus commercial tax.
I don't know if you can break out farmstead or not.
Yeah, it's all
We can-
there.
Okay.
It's gonna be
Better
a
than that.
really narrow slice.
Yeah.
Sounds good, though. I think would be useful. Anything else that you guys want added?
Since we'll be finalizing what that looks like here in the next week.
Okay.
All right. Jeremy looks like he was deep in thought on that.
I had something and then I lost it.
Should pop it back up.
Probably will. Give it time.
Okay.
Do
Go
you,
ahead.
do you want us to put it back on this?
No, it's fine.
If you think of it, let me know as we pull
Chat
it
'em up.
together.
Thank you.
Okay, then with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Adjourned.